Okay, great. So good morning, everyone. This is a meeting of the steering committee of the Vermont Climate Council. It's nice to see everybody. We have an agenda online. Maybe Liz Amler, if you could drop in the chat, I'll share my screen with it right now. It looks a little bit like this. We're going to get an update on what's happening with the editing and the copy editing and all that's happening with the climate action plan. There's actually nothing we need to do about that today. It's more of like a heads up. Also a flag that chapter authors are being asked to do a quick review of the copy edits. So we'll talk about that in a second. Our main piece of business we want to do in this half hour we have together is look at the agenda for next week. And in that, there's a few items when we get into it that we need to talk about. So when we click through that agenda, there's some things we need to talk about. We'll do some public comment just before the top of the hour and end at 9. That's what we have. Just quickly, steering committee members, anything else that you're not seeing on this agenda that you think it's important to signal right now? Okay. All right. Well, I don't see Sophie just yet, so I wonder if we want to pause on that till Sophie jumps in and we can start with the agenda. Liz Amler, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think we have some minutes to review as well. So maybe we do that.
Minutes. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. I jumped right over it again. So we have two sets of minutes to approve. They're both here. I'll give folks a pause just to oh, perfect timing with Sophie too. I'll give folks a pause just to click through to those minutes, remind yourself what was in there. And let me just give folks a pause to do that. Any questions or concerns about the minutes? Any requests for more time to look through them?
They looked good to me.
Same here.
Thanks, Jared. Thanks, Sarah. Okay. So not hearing requests for more time or concerns, let's consider those approved. Thanks, everyone. Great. So why don't we stick with, I just saw Sophie walk in the room. Good morning, Sophie. We were just jumping right into your piece about the update on copy edits, plain language summary, and design of the cap. So I'll turn it over to you, and thanks.
Great. Hi, everyone. Sorry, do we have, so this is just a heads up for, I believe you got Liz's email on Friday about all the copy edits. Just a moment to talk through that together, answer any questions you have. The goal is to have you all review the copy edits that have been done. Again, the purpose of these are for grammar, typos, clarity. The purpose is not to change any intention. So that's one of the things to look out for. If you see something that, oh, that's actually like not what I meant, like that would be an edit to reject. But hopefully it should all be pretty straightforward. You'll see in your chapters, in some chapters, there are some comments from the editor noting, oh, here's a broken hyperlink. There are a bunch of those. So that's something that we're asking for your help with fixing. And then another type of comment you'll see is clarifying certain places where there are citations needed in one way or another. We are available to help answer questions, or if you want to like look at it together and walk through and that's your preferred way to go through it, Liz and I can be available for that approach as well. We outlined a couple of options for how you can approach your edit. You know, if you look through and everything looks good to you, you can simply email us back and let us know, all good. If you look through and there are some things that need to be different, but it's easy to summarize in an email, you could approach it that way and just send us your responses through an email. Or if you're looking through and there's a mix of edits where you think you're going to reject some edits, you have to respond to some comments, and you want to do that through tracked changes in your copy, then you can do that and then send us back a version. So I'll just stop there with that brief summary, and would love to hear from you any questions I can help clarify.
Thanks, Sophie. And just to be clear, when you say you, you're talking about chapter authors. It's not specifically the steering committee,
Yeah.
though it's a nice overlap with some steering committee members being chapter authors as well.
Thanks for clarifying that. I often forget that not everybody had a role as a chapter author. So yes, it's specific to chapter authors, and which include a much broader suite of people that are here and not every single person who is here.
Yeah. Any questions for Sophie about this and what's being asked of the chapter authors?
It all sounds good. Thanks, Sophie. And
Great. Thanks, Jared. Okay. And Sophie, do you want to update folks on the two other pieces, the design and the plain language summary, just sort of where things stand on that?
Yeah, so so we've got a mock-up design of what the visual is going to look like that we'll put all the content in, and we'll get to share that with you all, the full council, at the meeting on the 15th. I'm really excited to share that with you. And then there were two chapters that did get additional editing treatment of trying to get them to a plain language place. Those chapters were the executive summary and the priority actions chapters. And the reason for those two is that those are going to inform a summary that will be graphically designed, and that separate summary is going to be really useful as an outreach piece for people who just want that quick hit of what is the climate action plan, what does it do. So those, we went through that process a little bit earlier with chapter authors for the executive summary and the priority actions. So that's all complete and finalized, and we'll be sharing that as an FYI out with the meeting materials for the 15th.
Love it. Okay. Any questions for Sophie about all these moving parts of trying to make the cap readable, digestible, beautiful? Any questions? Okay. Thank you, Sophie. I think that's it.
Thank you all.
And we'll do this again at the council meeting next week. And we'll have something to show, even better. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about is the agenda for next week, the September 15th council meeting. There is a draft version that you can see if you click through what I was just showing. Here, I'll share my screen again. Wow, I feel like they've changed the interface. Okay, this is an hour-and-a-half meeting, as we talked about in previous sessions. We're not doing 3-hour meetings. The material doesn't really warrant it. But we do have an hour and a half on the books for next Monday. And this is what we were thinking about when Liz Amler and Jane and I sat down and tried to figure out. And we went through our meeting minutes from the last time we all spoke, say, what is it we need to do here? And this is what we got. So let me just walk through what it is, and then let's figure out, there's some things that require some discussion, and then if we're missing something altogether, let's talk about that too. All right. There is some written public comment that's come in. As a good practice, we'd like to look at that first. And then we'll do what Sophie just did now, except she'll have something to show in terms of the design. Then there's this section here. There's two suggestions that have emerged. One through sort of a publicly typed comment or some reaching out to the Climate Action Office. Another through, I'm not sure how the rural resilience thing popped up. I think through a careful read, maybe it was the copy editors, I don't know. But there's two things that have come up since the council approved the cap in June that may warrant the council's attention. This is really where I think you all as steering committee can be very helpful. One thing is there's a bunch of rural resilience recommendations that came through in the big table at the bottom, not in the priority recs, but in the big table at the bottom that are actually complete, but they sort of snuck in there anyway somehow. And so before we, the Climate Action Office just sort of removes them, if it's complete, we want to flag them to the council and be like, hey, these slipped in there. We don't think they belong. It was an error. Can we take them out? So that's one set of things and should be short and sweet to look at that. The other one is interesting where someone had reached out who's involved in the geothermal space and said the way you wrote your geothermal recommendation isn't necessarily the best way to write it and doesn't focus the effort. And I'll get it wrong now. Maybe Liz Amler can get it right. And we don't need to solve it right now. But I think you all understanding the origin of this is important and whether it merits getting put on an agenda like this or whether it doesn't merit. So Liz, can you give a tiny bit of background on that one?
Yeah, so for the geothermal, it was Debbie New who had reached out and had suggested that the language is phrased as thermal energy networks because that's more of the industry term and is what I think PUC is using as well when talking about geothermal community scale networks. And then for the rural resilience, Katie Gallagher from Vermont Natural Resources Council reached out for about 4 of those completed recommendations through Act 181. So I'll create a document. I can create a document for the council meeting just saying, which are the recommendations, what's the feedback, who did it come from, kind of thing, and the council can consider it.
Thanks, Liz.
Yeah.
So I think the question for you all as a steering committee is, does this kind of thing warrant putting it on an agenda and, doing this? I would say the only thing in my mind that comes up is sort of a slippery slope of like, if people want to do nips and tucks on the thing forever, we're going to be inundated with those requests. But these two, I'm curious your feedback on them and whether they warrant an agenda item like this. Any thoughts? Anyone feel uncomfortable about having it on the agenda? Joey?
I share your concern about a slippery slope, but I guess wonder, these seem like sort of minor, maybe technical corrections. I don't know, like not a big deal. But I would want to be clear that there's a timeout.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not reopening content, right? It's like we did that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Jared,
But-
you're trying to jump in? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that both of these are there's some substance to them that is not just in the copy edit. So I do think it's appropriate to kind of bring it up for council consideration, especially because as I remember both of these, I think there may be a rationale, and it would just be good to have a conversation to make sure everybody's on the same page. We had this conversation about what to do with recommendations from the first climate action plan that had been acted on, and there was one school of thought that was saying, well, we should take them out from the next one because they're quote unquote done. And there was another one saying, well, no, in order for that to keep having the positive impact we're looking for, it needs to continue to be done. And just, it doesn't mean it's settled for all time. Some things need to be continued to be monitored or re-implemented or continue to be funded. So, I don't know what those rural resilience recommendations are that are quote unquote complete, but it may be appropriate to carry them over, even if there's not necessarily a new action, but just so we haven't lost track of it. And I've heard different opinions on this question of what is the more encompassing and appropriate phrase, thermal energy networks or community scale geothermal. And I confess I don't fully understand the distinction that the different folks in that space are making. And so just having a little bit of time to pause on it, have the transparency and clarity of conversation, make sure folks are on the same page, because I do think both of those have potentially substantive implications. So it is appropriate to include them. But hopefully there won't be much beyond that.
Thanks, Jared. Okay. Does that resonate with everyone else? Does that seem like the right approach? Keep it on the agenda for next week, Secretary Clark.
Would the intent be to share what those requested updates are ahead of the meeting?
Yeah, like right away. I feel like with Liz Amler, we can get
Okay.
something out in the next 24 hours, 48 hours kind of thing. So people have time. It also makes me think like, do we need someone there? Like, do we need to prep up Melissa or the PUC or someone so that they can be helpful on the geothermal piece, right? So we're kind of ready to have that conversation. Okay. All right. Excellent. So it sounds like this is going to work. Let's do this. And the key to this, what I'm hearing is let's get out some information ahead of time so people have a little bit of moment to sit and think about it. What I'm trying to do best practice on this, inserted a public comment here after the sort of initial discussion here, and then before you make decisions on those two items. So there's a public comment in between those two. So then just 10 minutes at the back end of that public comment to make a decision. Then Secretary Moore agreed to do a legislative wrap-up of relevant climate action things that came out of the last state session. So Secretary Moore agreed to do that, and that's something that you as a steering committee requested in the last time we spoke. And also about the federal legislation, something that you've signaled be interesting. So Jane agreed to do sort of like what's state of play right now and the implications for the Climate Action Office and for climate action in Vermont. So a state of play piece on that. Again, these are more just informational, like 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there kind of thing, or 10 minutes there. And then the final thing is just talking about next steps. There was a phrase that you all used in your last meeting about key implementation milestones. Like we don't really have those right now, but we certainly can start flagging what that might look like in the fall and into the winter, so that when you think about your like December meeting, we can be thinking about next steps and all what that means. Jared, go ahead, please.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I just wanted to go back up to the portion of the draft agenda on the legislative wrap-up. When we have had that in the past, oftentimes it has been Secretary Moore or another member of the administration alongside a member of the council who has been actively working with the legislature. And I would just encourage us to continue that. Joey has done it in the past, and I think is probably one of, if not the most active members of the council in terms of being aware of, and I just, there are differences of opinion on the intent and implications of different pieces of legislation, and just in the interest of balance and reflecting the structure of the council, I think it's important that that be a two-part presentation and discussion.
Okay. Joey, how do you feel about that?
I mean, I'm fine if Secretary Moore wants to take the lead and I can round out, but I mean, if she can, so I'm happy to do that in terms of good practice, makes sense to me.
Great. Well, in the absence of Julie, let's say, okay, if that seems like the right thing to do, and how about this? Like Joey, you and Julie can connect just so you're clear on who's doing what kind of thing. That's all right. Okay. Okay, great. And then this, I noticed, this is just 10 minutes, but it's Jane's going to say a few things, and then Melissa was going to say a few things from the PSD place of this, and Andrea, I guess you were here just a second ago. Yeah, Andrew, you're going to say a few things about the electric vehicle charging piece. Good morning. How are
Sorry,
you?
all my things are still off. Yes, I will give an update on what's going on with the funds being available now. So
Okay, great.
exciting news.
Okay, so that's it, hour and a half. And if we move more quickly, like I've been quite generous with the amount of time on this thing. 11:15 to there's like 25 minutes there, and then another 10 minutes there. It may take that if we feel like, as the points that Jared brought up need a lot of discussion. If not, it may move a little more quickly. We'll see. But I think we've been generous there. And so if we need a little bit more time on this, we might actually move a little faster than we think. Famous last words. Okay. Any other reflections, comments, requests on this agenda? Is there something missing that you were hoping would be there? Great. So I think that's it. Am I forgetting anything? Liz Amler, am I forgetting anything here for on the agenda that we needed them to weigh in? Okay. Great. And on this next steps, I mean, Jane can walk through, I think I see this as a Jane conversation to some degree of like, this is what you can expect out of the Climate Action Office and the implementation of this and that. So that'll probably be Jane. All right. Well, we do have some folks here joining us, observing our meeting this morning. Let's open up for public comment if anybody has a comment before we finish our meeting today. So if you've been listening in and have some comment on what's been discussed, feel free to raise your hand or open up your mic. Okay. Great. Anything else? Jared, I saw you just jumped off mute.
Just going to be to say thank you to everyone. Hope you have a good week. Thanks for facilitating, David, and looking forward to the meeting. I'll also try to do some outreach to some folks that I know are working in the thermal energy networks and community scale geothermal space to try to get some more clarity ahead of that discussion.
That would be great. That would be really helpful, honestly, because I bet the majority of the council doesn't have that like at their fingertips.
Yeah.
Okay, and Matt, I'm noticing your comment in the chat. Thanks for offering. So you can coordinate with Joey if you want on that. Great. And that's it. Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to fall. We're here. We're
Thanks,
cooking.
everyone.
All right.